So, first of all, Joe got 918 up 10 minutes ago. So that's a good omen for an exciting talk that we're about to receive from Bob Tutnauer, entitled Travels with the Tutnauers. And Bob and his wife joined Newbridge 18 months ago. And anyway, we're delighted that they're here. And I find it quite incredible to read that he retired 22 years ago. He looks like he's hardly be out of school at that time. But in spite of that early age of retirement, he had an illustrious career. When he was at Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company as president of spas and private clubs. He's also been CEO of Izod Lacoste, executive vice president for perfumes at Oscar de la Renta, vice president of May Department Stores International in Hong Kong. And so he has a lot of experience about a lot of things. And anyway, we're now going to hear about an exciting adventure that he and his family had a number of years ago. So, Bob, it's all yours.
Thank you. You know, Michael, someone mentioned when they saw this resume, they just felt that I should be a bit embarrassed that I couldn't hold a job. That's what they were talking to me about. But in any event, in planning for what I want to, thank you all for coming, by the way. This is really very impressive. Okay. In planning for this, and planning as to what to say, I really was not quite sure because, as was mentioned, I've had Albert and I and our children have had a long and exciting and not tumultuous, but a glorious life. And I didn't know how I was able to fit everything in. So what I did was I created in my own mind segments of my life at different times. And this is one segment that I will take you through. And I will tell you a little bit about how this came to be before I get into the trip itself. This goes back to the late 70s and early 80s, and I was not working. I didn't have a job, and I wasn't looking for a job. In fact, I felt at that time if I never had to work again, that would really be fine. I just was, there was a circumstance in my life, I was offered a position as a president and chief executive of a department store group in Rochester. And Albert and I at that time were thinking about our life and what we were going to do for the future with our children. And we were living in California at that time in Los Angeles, not really in love with Los Angeles and thinking that someday we would move back east, back to where our family was. And but wasn't really quite sure as to how to go about doing this. In any event, I was then offered, as I told you, a job, and I turned it down. We didn't want to do that. We didn't want to stay in the retail business, and I didn't want to. And the position was in Rochester, which was a lovely city, but I didn't want to live in Rochester. And so I turned it down, and for those of you who are involved in large companies, there's a drama involved when you either accept a job or you turn a job down, and it's really not the political thing to do is to turn down a job like this, and it became a little testy. And so what I did was I resigned. And there I was in California living in a lovely home with a lovely family, wondering what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And we were having lunch on Wilshire Boulevard in a lovely little cafe with a good friend of mine who suggested that why not take some time off? Why I was worked at that time about 19 or 20 years, and why not just relax and enjoy your life? And we talked about that for a little bit and came home to our house. Alba was really kind of quiet, and I said, so what did you think of that? And she said, Alba was always an adventurous kind of a person and was agreeable to all of the kinds of things, idiosyncrasies notwithstanding, that I got us involved in. And she said, we ought to kind of look into that and see how would we do that, she said. How would we finance it? How would our kids go to school? What would we do with the dogs and what would we do with our house? So we had a lot of things that we had to think about, which we did. And we thought about the house. It was at a time in Los Angeles, if not the rest of the country, a lot of people were coming over from Iran. There was tumult and shouting there, and most of the people, it seemed to me, who came over to Los Angeles came over with lots of money. So there was not going to be a big problem, I thought, in selling our lovely home. We lived in Westwood, and so that would not be a problem. Our animals, we foisted them off on friends and family who were glad to take care of them for us. They were kind of taken with the idea that we were going to have a trip like this. Finances, I worked with a gentleman who was advising me at that time, and we worked out a way that there would be cash, there would be a cash flow for me to go away and take this trip with my family. And so then, transportation. So I'll give you, let me see if I could get this here. So we thought that the best thing to do is if we were to travel in Europe and in Israel, perhaps a camper of sorts would be the thing to do, because we didn't really want to stay in lots of different hotels. We had done that in our lives before that. So we thought that we went to see this in a showroom in Los Angeles and bought it to pick it up in Germany. That was going to be part of our trip. This is a Volkswagen pop top. That top goes up, there's a bed up on top, there's a bed down below. And I thought it was kind of neat anyhow. I was interested in it even if we didn't take the trip. And let me just see where I'm up to here. Education. The education part of it was relatively easy. We were living in an environment in California where it's part of the entertainment business, so they were used to families traveling a great deal. So we went to the elementary school, and they were only interested really in that Jenny, who was 10, that we kept her up to date with mathematics. She felt, based on how we described the trip, she would really learn whatever she had to learn by just being part of the trip. With Lizzie, who was 16, we went to the University of California at Berkeley, and they have a plan for students like Liz who would be away with their family. She was assigned a professor who would develop her lesson plans. We would figure out a way to get these lesson plans to us. I thought you were signaling me that I ran out of time already. We figured out that we would use American Express as a mail drop wherever we were to go, and we would be in contact with her and with Alba's mother to get the lessons sent there. She would do her work. I would be her supervisor, not her teacher. I was not positioned to teach her. I was just going to make sure she did her work, which I really didn't have to do. She did it on her own. And so it sort of took care of everything. And then, so we decided that we would just go ahead and do that, except we had to talk to our daughters. And Lizzie, who was 16, she wasn't too excited about this. She just didn't think that she would like, she had a boyfriend, and she didn't quite get it. We had and have a wonderful, involved, supportive family, but this was kind of unusual. So she wasn't all that happy about it. Deborah, who was our eldest, who was not on this trip, She was in college, and she said she'd just rather finish college. Just keep in touch with her. She also was not rightly quite sure. And Jenny, who was 10, who was the feisty one, said, let's go. She was ready to take this trip. So we had no problem with them at all. And we went and we flew to Amsterdam. Amsterdam was our first stop. And I just wanted to acclimate the family to the time and to acclimate them to Europe. It was a big trip, and it was a lot for them to absorb. It was a lot for all of us to absorb. Everyone was very excited about this. We weren't quite sure what we were going to do. We did not have a specific itinerary. We knew roughly where we wanted to go. The family, which was always democratic, became even more, this is not political, more democratic as far as decision-making was concerned. We all discussed what we were going to do and when we were going to do it. It was not a matter of somebody like me telling them what to do. I didn't play that role, and I really felt great not playing that role. So we made a rough itinerary, and we went to Amsterdam, and we toured Amsterdam. Not there. There's, I think, one of the first days, so I was running there. You will find these pictures. They will not be things necessarily of interest, like the Eiffel Tower. I didn't take pictures of that. I only took pictures of us in various cities or towns so that in years to come, like now, we would look at it and say, do you remember that? We didn't have to show things that you all know about. Here's Albert and I. We were on I thought it was a boat, but it very well may have been a streetcar, and we're sort of looking around in Amsterdam. That was Albert. That was me, believe it or not. And there's Jenny, not so interested in what was going on. That's us in the street in Amsterdam, just so that people would believe that that's where we were. I must tell you, if I go back to Amsterdam, I never could really find this place. I would like to say that it's very historically important. I have the pictures, and I know it was in Amsterdam. I can't tell you anything about it. And so there we were, visiting the city, and we then left Amsterdam. This is a little advanced, and drove to Germany to pick up our van in a little town in Germany. I rented a car, and we drove there and dropped off the car. And we picked up the van, and we slept in the van the first night. And we were very cold, so at about 3 o'clock in the morning, we all got up and went into the bathrooms that were there that were heated, because I didn't know really how to work the heater in the car in the first place. And we had them outfit the van in certain ways. I had the tire put on the front. I had some refinements made inside that. And we started out on our trip to Paris. We went to a sporting goods store on the way, and we bought sleeping bags and dishes and things that we thought we would need if we were to camp. We didn't plan, Albert and I and our girls, we were not campers. So we didn't plan to camp a great deal, only if we wanted to, only if it was necessary. We really wanted to stay in small towns. We wanted to stay, and we wanted to live in the times that we were in these various areas as if that's where we lived. In the bigger towns, Paris and London and what have you, we changed that a bit at times, and we became tourists. We made a decision that we wanted to see anything and everything that tourists would see in these major cities. So it was a juxtaposition, if you will, as to how we lived. At times we lived as if we were the natives of that particular area. At times we stayed in lovely hotels and ate in the finest restaurants. And at times we stayed in these charming little village inns. People were as friendly as could be with us. They sometimes didn't get it. They were a little kind of surprised that this family, this was not the tourist season, would be traveling. But fortunately, I had these two cute, intoxicating little girls. And so we'd go into these little towns or little inns and so on. The doors would open up. People just wanted to take care of us and wanted to make sure that things were great. So we then took off and drove to Paris. And in Paris, our plan was to get set for a few days because Alba's family was going to come to see us. And so I booked a hotel in the 16th arrondissement, for those of you who may not know, that is the way the French in Paris denote different sections. This was right near the Bois de Boulogne, and so we could run a little bit there, and when the family came, it was great. And we became tourists when they were there, and we did shopping, and they enjoyed what they had to do. And then the big thing was to find an apartment, because we had decided that we wanted to live in Paris, and we wanted to live in a working-class neighborhood. We did not want to live. I was very familiar, and I'm familiar with Paris, because I used to go there on business a lot. And I didn't want to live in those areas. We didn't want to live in that kind of, it was that upscale area for that matter. We wanted to live the way we lived in America, except we would be living with French people. And we then found an apartment in a working class section on the right bank, and we used it as our home. It was a third floor walk up. There was a patisserie and a boulangerie down below. Jenny made friends with a little girl named Madeline, and they lived their life. And we went throughout Paris at various times using the metro and visited everything there was to visit that I thought would be of interest to our daughters. And they played a role in that too, because we talked about that. What would you like to see? We then used Paris as a base and took our van and went down south to Provence and to the Champagne area, went to the west and visited the cemeteries, the American cemetery, which was very impressive, and the German cemetery, which a lot of people don't go to, which was just a mile or so down the road, which was very dark and very somber. And we spent a lot of time during our trip. Let me change that. We spent a good deal of time, at times, in cemeteries. We didn't go to the cemeteries because of any death or anything like that, but they're very interesting because there's a history there. And if you take the time to look, you learn about different things. And what the girls picked up in German cemetery, which I didn't know either, German cemetery did not have the white crosses and stars of David that the American cemetery had. They had brass plaques that were in the ground, and it gave the names and the date of birth and the date of death of these soldiers. And many of them were 16, 17, and 18 years old, and my daughters, Lizzie particularly, picked that up. I mean, so obviously our enemy, and obviously they were out to hurt us, but my daughters picked up the fact that wasn't that sad? Wasn't that sad that 16-year-old boys were being buried because they were shot in a war? That was kind of sad. So we stayed in Paris, and we loved that, and we ate out a lot of times, and we were tourists, and we had not issues there, we had plumbing problems, so I called up a plumber to come and about a 25-year-old Frenchman who was really more interested in looking at Lizzie, my daughter, than he was really fixing our leaky faucet, and saw that I had a tennis racket and said, would I like to play tennis with his father and with him? I said, sure. She said, he lived way in the northern part of Paris, and he told me how to get there by metro, by the subway. And I went there, and I played tennis against he and his father. It was not the best game, but it was so nice to be there. And that was a true other working class neighborhood. And I thanked them very much, and I was ready to go home. They said, no, my wife wants you to come to the house. They had thought, and it was an error in translation, that Alba and the girls would have been with me. Because we got to the house, and it was full of their neighbors and friends who they brought over to, because they couldn't figure out. They couldn't figure out what we were doing there. And so everyone really sort of wanted to know that. So that was an event. We all got sick at times in Paris in the cold, damp weather there. We had to get a doctor who paid a house visit, by the way. We were not used to doctors paying house visits. He came and he took care of us. And he also was concerned about what we would do as we went on, who was going to take care of us, and what were we doing here anyhow with these daughters. We went and visited the art area, Montmartre, where when I was working, I would go there and I would buy local art. I would not buy what would be expensive art. I'd buy local art, which we have in our various places that we live really right now. So that was part, and I kept that. So we've used it as a base. I took we went to Provence and Champagne and Normandy, and we went to Honfleur and Trouville and Deauville, and we sort of exhausted France. The girls did. The girls thought maybe we should try something else, so we decided to leave, and our next stop was Spain. So what we did is we drove to the west coast of France and drove down the coastline towards Spain. And we celebrated Thanksgiving, if I remember correctly, in a town called Biarritz, which was right on the point as you went into Spain. And we were cautioned about how we were going to travel in Spain because we would be driving through the Basque area, and the Basque nation, the Basque people at that time, were very anxious to become separate from the rest of Spain. So there was, and they're a wonderful people, very tough, but the people said, they're not going to know who you are, so maybe you should take another route. But I thought that if we watched ourselves, we would be okay. And we traveled through the northern part of, I'm going to get up to that point here, the northern part of Spain. Oh, let me go back a little bit, if you don't mind. I forgot this here. As we were leaving Paris to go there, we couldn't find a place to stay because there were no accommodations, because I guess it was getting close to the holiday. And Lizzie saw lights in this big kind of chateau, and we drove over there, and it turned out to be one of many buildings like this, historical buildings, that were turned into places to stay for guests, for travelers. And so we pull in with our van, kind of dressed as gypsies, and people came out dressed in the beautiful uniforms, and the manager of the day with his morning suit. It was also kind of puzzled as to what we were doing. And this is where we had breakfast, which was really kind of elegant. This was one of the rooms. The rooms in some of the places that we stayed were rooms that were converted from nuns' quarters or religious little bedrooms. And they thought this was so nice that we probably should spend the rest of our trip there. They thought that we had done enough of this traveling. This was about 3 months into the trip, and why not stay in a great place like this, which was not the case. Then we left and continued. I told you we were in the northern part of Spain, went through the northern part of Spain into Portugal, and came down, and also the trips that we took were not exhausting trips. We stayed and stopped in as many small towns and small places as we could. It was an easy kind of a trip. Later on it became a little hectic, which I'll discuss with you. And so here we are, looking relaxed and happy. This was the border going into Spain. So we're now in Spain, and we're heading down. There the girls are sleeping in the van. Am I going too fast on these things? Okay. So they're happy. They're just happy leading, and so's the dad. The dad's happy to. Hold on, wrong way. So we get into, through Portugal, we stopped in Lisbon and Estoril, which is a resort area, went to the south of Portugal and stopped off in a little town called Albufeira. This is not Albufeira. I went a little too far. I'll explain where this is, because some of you might know it anyhow. Albufeira was a little fishing village, and we just loved it. The people loved us. We loved them. They had good restaurants there. Jenny made friends with a whole group of dogs. We had different names to these dogs. I'm going to tell you. Titch and Benji and Muscles and Spike. Those were some of the dog names that she had. And we stayed there for a while, and then we kept going, and we went into the southern part of Spain. And this is a picture some of you may recognize. This was Sevilla. These are famous pigeons that people see all over the world. So Alba looks kind of happy, and the pigeons were happy, and the dad was happy. And then we started walking through the little villages on this part of Spain and enjoying ourselves. You see the Moorish influence, the stones and the beautiful designs. And we kept going there, and we kept going, and we went into to France. But I'll tell you, there's one story that I'll share with you about that trip. In Portugal and in Spain, they have a series of accommodations. In Portugal, they're called pousadas, and in Spain, they're called paradors. And these are old, reconverted churches or monasteries or buildings of some repute that have been made into a chain of places to stay. They were great. The food was great, the people was great, and what was nice about it is that they would be able to make plans for me for the next stop. Because I haven't really talked to you a little bit about the fact that in all of these places, I had to research whether or not there was an American Express that had the facility to not only for me to receive Lizzie's lessons, but for me to send these lessons back. So there was a lot of logistics involved. I must say, I don't think I could do this today. I don't think that I would have the patience or anything to do this thing. But we loved it then, and it was easy, and it was really. So we say that. So now we're here now in France, and we met our family in Marseille, and drove to a little town called Mouzane. How did we find the little town? Just like we found everything else. We would just drive around, come to a place, look good, we'd stop there. And Deborah met us there also. And we stayed in Mouzane for about a week or so. And the people there who owned it just sort of adopted us and stayed there for a while. This gentleman, who I must tell you, I hadn't seen the picture until I picked it out 20 years ago, was a friend of mine from America, who I remembered had built a little home for himself and his wife in this area. It was in an olive grove, and he just also was so pleased to see us and see my kids. Name is Matt Shaw, as a matter of fact. Deborah, Lizzie. This is Grandma Dorothy, was making sure that everything was okay. Okay, so we saw that. Don't give up. Okay. On the way to France, though, I did something which has really upset all of us as we talk about it, and we talk about it a lot. So here we are going along the Costa del Sol, and we have, there's no GPS or anything like that. You're using maps. You all remember maps. We're using maps, and no computers, no tablets, no nothing. We were just traveling like we used to travel. And the road seemed to change a little bit, and it became a little narrow road. And I said, I think we could do this. It was sort of like late in the afternoon. I think we'll be able to manage this. But what happened was the road got narrower and narrower, and so narrow, and this is no exaggeration, I had to fold in the rear view mirror on the van so that I could stay on the road without breaking it, and on the other side was the cliff into the water with no fence. And I'm saying, whoa, this is not really a smart thing. And as I'm telling it to you now, I'm getting upset, as my daughters are when we talk about it again, because it was really, we couldn't back up if somebody was coming forward. We couldn't go I couldn't even get out. So it was getting darker, and I had Lizzie we had a big torch flashlight, to lean out the window, no exaggeration, and hold the light so that I did not go close to this. And I'm saying that this is nuts. I mean, but you're faced with something. What are you going to do? You just do. It was a very short trip. It felt like days, but it was very short. We ended up obviously fine, and we ended up getting to France. So we stayed in France, in Lausanne, and then we went to Nice to visit. Let me see if we have Nice here. No. That's the family. Here we are. We're at Nice, and that's Amy, which is their younger cousin, on the beach at Nice, and we loved Nice. And we had lunches in these wonderful little cafes with mussels and white wine, not the girls, just us, and skated and sat and enjoyed the sun, enjoyed the people, and stayed there for a while. And we visited galleries and museums, and we had an issue, and I'm going to ask you a question now. We had an issue in one of the garages. I had the family in the van, and we went into one of these garages that was a hill, and we got stuck. The roof of the van hit the top thing, and so here we are, the whole family, and there's Dad. You know, I'm the leader of the trip, right? Well, what are we going to do? So what do you think we did?
Let the air out of the tires.
Let the air out of the tires. You knew, you were there. That's exactly right. We let the air out of the tires. We then brought our family to the airport. They went home, and we had to go north. We had to bring Deborah north to Paris. She was meeting a group from Colgate who were taking I think it was their sophomore year abroad. They were going from Colgate, they were going to Israel. And so we drove up to Paris and took a hotel, reserved a hotel which was a block off the Champs-Élysées. This is New Year's Eve, and we had New Year's Eve celebrated in the McDonald's on the Champs-Élysées. And they thought that was kind of cool. And we all went to sleep, and we woke up the next day. This was another adventure. There was an ice storm, an unexpected ice storm in Paris. The city was encased in ice, as was our van. I couldn't even get into it. I couldn't open the doors of it. It was just encased in ice. So we had to do something, because I had to get Deborah to Charles de Gaulle Airport, and we had to get moving. We couldn't just stay there. So I went back to the hotel, of course. Eventually was able to get in and turned on the motor, which started, and turned on the heater, and it defrosted the car, and went back to call this professor. Now, I had known where he was going to be in the airport, but I was not quite sure how to ask for it, so I thought I would be helped by the people in the hotel, but the phones were down because of the storm. So I walked to the Champs-Élysées figuring that the payphones might be working, because the payphones might be working. I was hoping the payphones would be working. And I called up, and I had rudimentary French, and spoke to a woman who said, bonjour, and then I said, I can't speak French very well, and I said, I have an unusual request of you. I'm looking for this professor who is taking a group of students from Colgate University. They were landing in Paris, and they were making a change. I don't know any of the flights, and they were making a change to the plane to Israel. So she said to me in her inimitable English, Monsieur, you are so lucky. The professor was standing right at her desk. Could not plan something like that. Charles de Gaulle Airport is as big as Manhattan. It was amazing. And I said, this is just incredible. And he said, yes, it is. I said, so I'm going to get Deborah to the airport. Your job is to make sure you don't take off before I get her there. I figured the roads to Charles de Gaulle, I think it was called the Peripherique. I'm not sure. But in any event, I thought that the roads would be good. I thought that the city might be kind of embalmed in the ice, but they would take care of the highways. And they were. There was nobody on the road. Everybody was inside. It was only people like us. And we drove, and I made up where I would meet them. Albert and the girl stayed in the van, and I took Deborah into the airport to this assigned place, and we dropped her off, and then we went south. We hit a little snow, as you could see, and they slept a little bit. Lizzie, she did this for effect. I want you to know, she just did that for effect. I was very happy at that time. And so we then left Paris and we went into Italy. And we spent a number of days in Italy. We went to Milan and Venice. Milan for a day, Venice for 2 days, Florence for 3 or 4 days. I didn't want to spend too much time in these bigger cities because our focus was the small towns. And always staying in inns and always staying and trying to meet the local people. So we did that. Here is Jenny. Here is the Colosseum. They still look happy. Kind of beautiful. Here we go. I think it's Florence. I'm not sure. But here's Rome. And then we decided that we were going to leave Italy and head eventually to Israel. So we drove down south, it was southwest, to a town called Bari, which is on the coast of the Adriatic. And Bari was a town where people who were traveling to Greece by boat would catch the boats. It was commercial and resort-wise. And I made arrangements to have the car shipped with us, booked the boat, and we then got on this boat and we went across the Adriatic and ended up in Greece. And I remember the feeling that I had in Greece, even though we were not necessarily conversant with all of the languages of all of the other towns. When it was France or Italy or Romance languages, we could sort of make do. In Greece, the signs are in Greek. And now, then, so what do you do? We just kept I kept the water to the right, and we kept going straight down until we came to, I think the square was Constantinople Square, or Constitution Square. I don't remember, and I didn't keep very good notes. But we went there, and we went into this big square, went to American Express, which I had felt that we were going to, so I made the arrangements for that. And then we booked a room. We booked a place to stay for about 3. The town, by the way, in case any of you are interested, from Bari to Greece, the town that we landed in was Igoumetsu. I have it if you'd like that, Igoumetsu. And we stayed in Greece, and for a while, Lizzie and I ran a bit. We ran on I think I may even, I was going to say, no. we decided that we've had enough of that, and we went south in Greece to a city called Piraeus. And in Piraeus, we caught another car ferry that took us to Haifa. That was a longer trip. I think you'll see the water. Oh, here's Greece. Here's Lizzie doing some Zorba dance on the balcony in Greece. Here's Bob being smart. Here's the girls enjoying themselves, more so that. Lizzie, who was a ballerina, felt that she should do that. Here we are. Oh, that's the end of where the marathon runner ended his run and died. Greek ladies and a Greek man, more from Greece, a religious person. Okay, we are now, here is the car ferry that's going to take us to Haifa. And we are now, when we landed in Haifa, I went straight to Jerusalem. Didn't spend time in Haifa, and met family there. That's my cousin Moshe and some of members of his family, and we spent the next couple of weeks touring Israel. From the north until the south, we had friends visit us. That's one of Jenny's friends who stayed in. We had an apartment in Jerusalem right overlooking the Knesset, and we probably lived there for 3 months. My cousin and his family lived close by. He would have to keep guard at night. They would walk along the streets with a rifle, and I would go at night and I would walk with him. So I was guarding Jerusalem also. These are friends. We visited different markets with them. Okay. I kept this sign because most of the instructions are classic instructions, but the last one sort of stuck with me, where it says, visitors, follow these instructions. You have been warned. They were not kidding. I mean, we have been warned, and so don't go off the main road because they could not be responsible for us there. This is the Knesset. This is more of Jerusalem. This is that. This is Bob, the driver. Okay. We couldn't figure out who this was. This is my family there. I think this was a goodbye dinner one night. This is Lizzie. This is Caesarea. That's on the road up north in Israel. We are then going into Yugoslavia for a while. I don't have too many remembrances, and I didn't take a lot of notes, and I didn't take a lot of pictures, but so we went into Yugoslavia. The people were all great. The people, again, I would repeat myself, just were so pleased that we were there and so taken with the fact that our daughters were there, so we kind of enjoyed it. There they are, more of that. That's the way the Pop Top looks when it was open and we slept in there. Now we are going back up. This is Florence, and we stopped off in St. Moritz to do some skiing on the way back to Italy. We diverted a bit and went skiing and skating in St. Moritz. And at that time, I got a call from Alba's mother. This was kind of interesting. It's personal but interesting. And I was asked if I could call up a friend of mine who was in Los Angeles. He was the vice chairman of May Department Stores. And I had known him as a friend when we had lived there, and he asked where I was and what was I doing and how long did I think I was going to be doing this, because there was an opportunity. He said, we're not sure if you're looking for a job, but there was an opportunity with May Department Stores if you're interested. And I said, yeah, I would come to talk to you about it. They said, when are you going to be in Florence? I said, in about 2 months or so. He said, well, we'll meet you there. So we got to Florence, and I went to the office there, and they had to leave, but left me tickets to fly to Paris. So we parked, I parked, Alba and the girls and the van, and I went off to Paris to figure out what they had in mind, because, I knew at that point that as much as I would have liked to, I couldn't live the rest of my life doing nothing. I had to do something. And they were unable to tell me what it was, because the person that I was going to replace did not know he was being replaced. This is real big business, right? And so I said, okay. They said, when will you be in America? I'll be in America at such and such. Come to see us in our corporate office. Fine. So we left it that way. And now we went and we took a boat and we went to England. And here is little shots of us in England. In the coast there were places, aquariums and places that were sanctuaries for seals and for turtles. And Stonehenge. And here, of course, typical sights of London. We rented an apartment in Hyde Park. How are we doing? Okay? A little bit. For about 6 weeks or so, and just loved London. We toured London as tourists. By the way, I'll go back again. We also tried to live as best we could as locals. We didn't stay in the finest place. Well, we had that apartment, but we used London as a base too. And we went up to Scotland. We went to visit Nessie and the Loch Ness monster, who is lovely, by the way. She shouldn't be called a monster. And we went to Ireland, and we spent a little bit of time there. The girls loved to be in Ireland, and the Irish loved my daughters. Boy, they just certainly did. And that's the end of the pictures. So what happened? So we are now in America. I had shipped the van home, picked it up, and was driving back to Los Angeles, still as a tourist. Stopped off in St. Louis, and in St. Louis, they gave me a series of tests. At that time, some of you might remember, there was a great interest in having executives take these personality tests so that they could determine if you could do well with the other people in the company. To me, that was sort of much ado about nothing, but that was what was in vogue at the time. So we did a couple of things, and then they told me what the job was. And the job was to go to live in Hong Kong with my family and be responsible for the Far East for May department stores. There would be in Korea, Taiwan, India, China, Japan, all of that. And I said I would let them know. I was so cocky at that time. I'd let them know. And we're driving along, and because of the democratic kind of family we had, I asked them what they want to do. So Lizzie said, I give Mommy my vote. I don't want to vote. Jenny said, I think we should go. Alba said, we should learn a little bit more about it. And I don't know anything about the schools or anything like that. She said, since they seem so anxious, why don't you see if they'll fly us over and we can take a look at Hong Kong. So we were in a little gas station in Cody, Wyoming, and I called them up on the phone. I'm laughing because, these things are just so bizarre. And I said, I'm interested. I'm interested in coming to Hong Kong, but we have to go there. We have to go there to see how we can fit our family into this place. And they said, okay, we'll leave tickets for you in Los Angeles. And they did. And we got to Los Angeles where we had friends, and we had our daughters stay with family there. And Alba and I got on a plane, Pan Am as a matter of fact, and we flew to Hong Kong. And that's the end of this segment. That's all.